It's so wonderful to see so many people here. Thank you very much for coming to this launch, and we're just so pleased to have had so much great feedback from everybody about what we've done. I'm Lynn Keeley, and I'm your host for today. I'm the Special Collections Librarian, so I'll be walking us through this whole proceedings. Now, I'd especially like to welcome to the show Sonia Hornery, MP, Member for Wallsend, historian Mike Scanlon, Vera Deakin, our wonderful benefactor, Sharon Schilling, representing Coal and Allied, the Coalfields Heritage Group, our other partners, some local historical groups who've kindly joined us, and most importantly, the interviewer's family, the Delaney family, and the interviewees, of which we have, I think, 3 here, and the interviewees' families, for those who can't be here. Now, I'm particularly delighted with this project because I myself am from the coalfields, as is my family, from Western and Curry. And it's been a great privilege to hear all these voices and to recognise some of the names from my childhood. Now, the first part of the proceedings will be a welcome to country, and we're honoured to have Auntie Zelma here, who is from the West Lakes group.
Hello, my name is Zelma Moran. I am a descendant of the Anawan people from the New England area. I would like to acknowledge the Awabakal people who are the traditional custodians of this land. I would also like to acknowledge all the Aboriginal people from Newcastle, Upper Hunter, Nelson Bay, Dungutty, Darkendun down in Central Coast, Warramai people from Nelson Bay, and the Gee people from the Scone peoples, and so that is where all the tribes come from in the region. And I would like to acknowledge all the elders and the important role they play in the community, and extend a welcome to all the elders past and present and future. Also, welcome each and every one of you to this country. I hope that your experience goes well with pride and have a successful future with this beautiful thing that's going on today. And it's so great to go back in history to find out how they lived back in the 1960s, 50s, 70s, and it's so great. I am so proud to be part of this today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Auntie Zelma. Now, the next part of the show, as it were, is a talk which, well, I'd like to introduce Brian Andrews, OAM, who is the Honourable Secretary of the Coalfields Heritage Group, who's written a small talk about John William Delaney, Jack Delaney. Now, this is going to be delivered by another member of the group, Lexi Matthews, as Brian, because of health reasons, no longer does public speaking. Feel free to tap him on the shoulder during the lunch and have a chat to him about Jack or many of the items that you'll find at the Edgeworth David Museum. And as I said, they're downstairs. Some of them are downstairs, a very small subset, but it gives you an idea of what's available. So Lexi, I'll hand over to you now.
Stand up, Jack. As Lynn said, this was written by Brian. Brian has known Jack for many years. John William Delaney, better known as Jack, was born in Lithgow 97 years ago on 17th of January 1919. During Jack's life, twinkling eye and storytelling charm made him one of the Hunter's most prominent historians. Jack's move to Cessnock with his parents and his older brother Ted came in 1923, only 4 years old at the time. Jack arrived in the coalfields the same day, September 1st, of the Bellbird mine disaster that killed 21 men. He would thoroughly explore this event as a historian. Attending school in Cessnock and at Maitland Maris Brothers, Jack's early days as a student ended when he left to support his family at the age of 15. He joined the railway department as a station porter at South Maitland. Fighting for industrial awards whilst working his way up to become station master, Jack eventually took up an executive position as traffic controller. His dedication to the region's past extended right through his life. When he died in 2010, he was still compiling history of every post office located in the Cessnock local government area. Dedicated to the Hunters region's past, Jack compiled more than 30 books, pamphlets, audio tapes of the region's pioneers. As a historian, he was a keen conversationalist, compiling extensive oral history of the region's miners, winemakers, business people. Many of the subjects of these recordings are now deceased, but the recordings were made the recordings more valuable. No matter what Jack reproduced, whether it was a book, a journal, or an audio recording, Jack never enforced copyright, ensuring they were always freely available to all. Brian Andrews' first contact with Jack came in November 11, 1984, at an Andrews family reunion at Mulberry, when Brian was the chairman of a successful reunion of 1,100 family members. Jack was there, cassette recorder in hand, producing one of his 100 recordings. 12 years later, in 1994, shortly before Brian retired to live in the coalfields, he was contacted by Cessnock History Society to take a role as their secretary. As their secretary had left the region to take up farming in the state's northwest. This brought Brian renewed contact with Jack Delaney. Aware of Jack's valuable contribution to the city's history, Brian nominated Jack for award even though he was living at Stockton for Cessnock Australia Day. Jack was recorded an appreciation award. Within a couple of years, in fact 1996, Brian was contacted by Kurri Kurri High School to investigate taking over the school's successful disused museum, known as Sir Hedgeworth Edward Memorial Museum. It hadn't been used for several years, covered in thick layer of dirt and dust, and the interior being penetrated with creeping vines throughout the interior. Unfortunately, the Society already had its own museum at Wollombi, and to take this on would be quite a demand. However, Brian convinced 8 Society members that it was worthwhile, and for 2 or 3 months they worked every weekend to completely clean all exhibits, the floors, walls and curtains. Finally, in 1996, the Edgeworth David Museum opened, a duty roster was made up, publicity was given to the local press, and it was an extremely difficult start. The Cessnock Society was not happy, so the 9 members who had cleaned and restored the then 25-year-old Kurri Museum formed themselves a new society, Coalfields Heritage Group. This was in 1997. The Cessnock Society gave them $50 to make a start. That was 19 years ago. During that time, the museum has made remarkable achievements. Local historians, now deceased, were impressed with our progress and the attitude to our recording the region's history. They donated their collections to the museum archives. Kim Comerford, Ken Mahane, Jack Delaney. The museum was an ideal setting for these 3 historians to regularly visit and use the museum as a perfect location to further comply their history among good company. Otherwise, private collections followed. The Percy Sternbeck photo collection of some 5,000 photos dating to the mid-1970s. I think most of you have probably seen those on Facebook now anyway, have been used to illustrate our Oris collection. As the community organisations involved, such as Dapper Tappers Ladies Dance Group, the Kurri Apex Club, Kurri Retired Nurses, Matron Pike's Family, public and Catholic school magazines, and Cessnock Provost Ladies all donated their records, photos collection and photo albums to our museum. Not only did Jack Delaney deposit all his audio tapes, his coal mining histories, his Catholic story of all the Cessnock region, with all public schools in the same area, his roots into the wine area were all regularly used by our museum visitors. A visitor recently wanted to know a little bit at the local school, Mistletoe Farm Public School. Sure enough, it was there in Jack's work. The majority of the museum exhibits on display here come from the museum. As I say, they're downstairs, and we have many, many more if you come and visit us. We're open Sundays and Wednesdays. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Lexi and Brian. That's great. Vera, would you like to speak now or a little bit later?
Oh, just a few minutes. I'm a member of Stockton Historical Society. And Jack was a member of the Stockton Historical Society, and I thought you might like to know a little of his conduct. He was a very esteemed and jovial and loved member of our society. He had a touch of the Delaney, being Irish descent like I am, and used to go and collect him from his tiny little flat at Stockton, and I can see him sitting at his little kitchen table where he's writing the manuscript of the first 20 years of Newcastle. And we saw him through, we had a launch, quite a big launch in my large family room in Stockton before they had the launch over in Newcastle's history unit in the Newcastle Library. And Mike Scanlon wrote him up. I used to pick him up because, like my husband, he got very painful legs and it was hard for him to walk and long distances, and I used to pick him up and take him home. And I owed him, he carted me down to the archives of the Lands Department in Sydney, where I was able to get access to some of the early landowners, particularly the first settler on Dempsey Island and Mosquito Island, which are now part of the monstrosity they call Kooragang, because it's now a coal dump. That's all I wish to say. I'm honoured to be here. I'm really honoured to be here, remembering Jack, and also to meet his beautiful daughter Helen again.
Thank you very much, Vera. I should have said it's Vera Deaton, our benefactress. Now, the next stage is me speaking about the project, just telling you what it's all about and the kind of work that's gone into it. And we're going to also acknowledge all the wonderful people who have contributed to the project. So, it's a digitisation project. It's probably, certainly in terms of time and effort, I think it's probably the biggest one we've ever undertaken, because the audio files on the cassette tapes are all about 45 minutes long, and our people have to listen to them as they digitise them, turn them into sound files, and then we've edited out bits, really personal things, for example. Nothing much, but if someone says they lived at such and such a place, or if they're talking about some intensely personal things, then while we've got the original recordings there, if their families want them, the stuff that has been made public has been edited somewhat for those reasons. So, what's it all about? Well, it's all about the people here amongst us, families, the community, the local community, the jobs they did, the way they lived, where they went shopping, with, as I will say later, many, many different occupations. It's about society in the Hunter Valley. People's opinions, there's an awful lot of opinions in those tapes. We are Hunter River people, exactly. Anecdotes, stories, and the best thing of all, it's through their voices. And I think someone's voice is something which is intensely personal. And when someone departs, that's often the thing that we want most. So in this case, we've been able to do it for people. So what do we actually do? Well, as I just said, we digitised and edited hundreds of Jack Delaney's tapes. We wrote summaries. When I say we, I mean our team. I don't mean me personally. I did some of the later work. We researched births, deaths and marriages, so we got people's dates and their correct names. I found Ancestry.com was a real boon at times, because I could look up the electoral rolls. If you ever think anything's private, think again. We added metadata, that stuff that the government doesn't really understand. So things like titles, descriptions, keywords, so people can find the tapes or the digital files. We found photos to go with the tapes because a sound is nice, but it's also good if you've got a photo to reference it, to put it in context. We entered the data into Excel spreadsheets, and I think I see them in my dreams, as do my colleagues. We converted the files to MP3, which are the small ones that you can put on a memory stick or any other medium. And we uploaded them to a tool called SoundCloud, which is shown there. We then put the links on the website so that you can find it more easily, put things in alphabetical order. And we ran workshops, so we had one in Cessnock, Muswellbrook and Singleton. And these were very successful. People were very responsive, and I know Graham Harper is here from the Richmond Vale Railway Museum, and he was there, as were, I'm sure, some other people that are currently in this room. So this is the website here, and we've got the address. So why did we do it in the first place? Now this project, as I think most of you know, was originally done by the Newcastle Regional Museum, and they digitised a couple of little bits of tape, but they haven't been able to do the whole lot. And we were lucky enough to find the Coalfields Heritage Group, which had a set of tapes, and so we obtained some money from our other generous benefactors, Coal and Allied, in a grant, and we were able to do this project. Now, the tapes are deteriorating. I'm sure we've all had audio cassettes, video cassettes at home, and we all know what happens after a little while. In fact, any form of medium like that, it tends to decay, hence this rather gruesome tape there. These belong to the community. They belong to you. And we believe they should be more accessible to you and the public. They're telling a story about a very important place and time. Now, a lot of the people who were interviewed were in their 80s, 90s. I think we even had a centenarian amongst them. And we had some people who then went on to become over 100 years old. So these people were remembering back right to the beginning of the century. And they're remembering an important part of Australia's history. It's often not publicised, but I think it should be. I think it's important. Everyone here is extremely important. And we want people to be excited about their past. We want them to be informed, and we want them to be able to record their own audio and video. And if people want, we can always run some more workshops to show you how to do it, if you don't already know. I mean, some people will know more than we do. Now, our partners in this enterprise have been the University Library, so that's whom I'm representing, the Coalfields Heritage Group from the Edgeworth David Museum, who have provided the tapes and support and information. The Coal and Allied Community Development Fund, which has given us $70,000 towards this project. Now, the people who have actually done the nitty-gritty, these are our workers, and a number of them are standing up the back. We have Paige Wright, who has been the project manager and has done a terrific job. She's done the little videos that you can see downstairs and here, and she's also done all of these posters around the wall here and downstairs. She's done it, and she's kept everybody together, you know, herding cats. Rosie, who's working on that ghastly camera. Rosie has been our muse, as I once put it, M-U-S-E. She has been wonderful. She came up with the idea and has followed it through. Sue, who's just up the back here, Sue Payton, has been digitising away in her area of our reading room, working like mad, going slowly and saying nothing. Michael Sheriff, Michael's up the back here. Michael is our senior audio digitiser and has done a wonderful job, not only with these tapes, with the digitisation, but also about 200 or more of the university's own tapes. And much of that work has been done as a volunteer. Anne Hardy, the Cultural Collections historian, Dr. Anne Hardy, she's been working on research and also on the project digitising, summarising, etc. Hayley Halliwell, who's not here today, has been digitising and summarising. Peter Trenbarth, who's up the back too. Peter has been finding photos, becoming a master of the Library of Congress subject headings. So I think he's a born librarian. Lee Politis, who isn't here, who was another great digitiser. Natasha Schroeder, who's currently over in University of Aberdeen. She's been another one of our volunteers. Joel Kelsey and Anne Kay have joined us more recently doing the digitisation, and Michelle Watson, who is up the back of the room, has also been one of our summarisers and editors. And I've also got Greg Anderson, the University Librarian here, and Mark Sutherland, the Associate Librarian, Research and Information Services, who have been a great support and enabled us to do a lot of the things that we've done. Now, apart from the interviewer, about whom you've heard, the interviewees are the key to this whole project. It's all about them. So we've got people from as many occupations as you can think of on the coalfields or in the Hunter Valley. So mine workers, there's about 320 files so far of mine workers. Vignerons, mines, wines, bookmakers, soldiers, sailors, airmen. We've got a military cross recipient, for example, amongst them. Jockeys, council staff, farmers, graziers, teachers, jewellers, grocers. You can read as well as I can. The car dealers, boxers, clergy, and in those days, of course, talking about boxers, the sportsmen went down the mines or in their shops or whatever during the day, and they did their boxing at night. You didn't have professional boxers or other sportsmen in those days. And that was a bit of a surprise. I kept thinking, oh my goodness, this man is actually working as a miner, and he was also doing things on the weekend, apart from boxing. And then I had to get a bit small with the typeface, because we've got footballers, Figaro players. I don't know if any of the ladies here remember Figaro? Yes. Musicians. You know, the bands, the wonderful bands from the coalfields from northern England. The choirs from Wales, all them, they're all represented. Undertakers, it's a bit morbid, but so to speak. Various transport people. So Jack was particularly keen on learning about bus drivers and transport systems, and we do in fact, I think, have representatives of those families here today. Photographers, butchers, etc. Okay, so now we come to a couple of the voices. Now, these are a couple of videos that Paige has put together using photos from our collections and the voices. So they're little sound clips. They're not full 45-minute tapes. Otherwise, you'd all be fainting from hunger.
Things have changed a lot since you were a boy.
When I first started to work, I was 13 and 10 months.
Yeah.
And I started work at 6 o'clock in the morning. I worked till 5:30 at night.
Yeah. Long day, wasn't it? 6 days a week?
6 till 12 of Saturday.
Saturday. What did you do Saturday evening? Play tennis or?
Out in the bush.
Yeah, out in the bush, did you?
Oh, that was on a selection.
Yeah, you cleared up and worked on the property.
Well, we used to put our day's work in the mill and come home and have tea and go out in the paddock,
Yeah.
dig round stumps,
Yeah,
saw logs up and roll them in and set them alight.
yeah, around the stump.
Many a time I've heard the train going through a wobber, like running down that
hill
to the station, 9 o'clock at night, and we're out lighting fires.
Hard life. What did you do then as a boy? Did you play in the bush as a kid, or what did you do for fun?
I wasn't 14 when we went out onto the selection.
Yeah,
The fun that I had was out grubbing around stumps and sawing up logs and rolling them in alongside to burn them out.
yeah. That's a lot of
We
fun.
we didn't get much recreation those days.
No, not like the kids today.
No,
What sort of a house did you have on the selection?
a slab place.
A slab place, was it?
We
Earth
went,
floor?
we went out and felled the trees, and we
Yeah.
got them. I forget now who brought them in, and I think the uncle let the dad have the mill
Yeah,
for the day while he cut them up.
into slabs.
Mm.
How was the mill driven?
Steam. Yeah.
Yeah.
When I first went to the mill there, I wasn't 14. I used to drive the steam engine.
Yeah, were they all steam, all those mills?
Yeah,
The whole lot of them?
yeah.
I didn't think there'd be any electric power.
No, our light was kerosene.
No water neither?
No, we used to get it out of a swamp, our drinking water, when we first went out there.
I say in the young days, we had motorbikes. Jack was his brother. He used to ride a Red Indian motorcycle. I think Harold had a Harley Davidson, or we had a Red Indian too, I forget now. An Indian, a Red Indian motorcycle. And I used to have a BSA. And but we used to start from the Devil's Elbow.
Yeah, or even below that, I think.
Yeah, well sometimes we'd get them on the next turn.
Yeah, come up.
And that was a tricky thing running around, and it was all gravel, it was no tar. I finished up one Saturday afternoon, we raced there, and I was on the last turn, we're going to the top. We used to run right against the fence to get straightened up. And as I come out, I got in some loose stones that was laying there, little gravel stones. The whole bike stood right across the road, down in the gutter and up the other side of the bank. And I come off and sat on a bloke's lap. Well, this bloke then couldn't talk for an hour after.
You've been involved in quite a lot, son, over the years.
Well, one time, now just imagine it now,
Yeah.
of having a quarter-mile flappers, speed trials on Maitland Road past the gasworks. Try and have one now. Well, we used to have when they first started, we used to start back down near the telecom, near the telecom ground. That's where
Come
we
over
used
the top.
Come over the top, and when you hit the top was when we used to have the flying. Just over the bridge was the starting line, and you ladder out. We used to have flying quarter miles, way down there and straight.
Okay, I think I should also mention before I hand over to Greg Anderson that a couple of gentlemen will be, or one gentleman at least will be recognising some of his photos in the form of Barry Howard here. And Philip Onion, who has also donated many photos to our cause, is also present. So thank you to those two gentlemen. And now I'm going to hand over to Greg Anderson, University Librarian, who will do the actual launch.
Thanks very much, Lynn. And on behalf of the University of Newcastle, I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to you all today. And I'd also like to respectfully acknowledge the traditional custodians, the Pambalon clan and the Wapical people on whose traditional land this campus is built. The Deputy Vice-Chancellor Academic, Professor Andrew Parfield, unfortunately wasn't able to come today, but we will be joined at lunch by the Pro-Vice-Chancellor, Learning and Teaching Professor Liz Bird. I would also like to extend a warm welcome to our distinguished guests, Ms Sonia Watery, MP, Ms Sharon Schilling from Colin Allied, and also to Auntie Zelma and members of the Delaney family and their interviewees and their families. It's great to have you here today. Now, a little bit of background about me. I was born in Cessnock back in the late 50s, and even though we moved away from that area, I have a very special connection because my grandmother lived there until she died in 1970. So during the 60s, we would have constant visits. And as we drove up along the road that went through Western, into Kurri Kurri and up through Abermain, up to Cessnock, I was particularly fascinated with a lot of the mine sites and colliery buildings that were along the real love of my life, which became the South Maitland Railway. So Lynn and I share a passion here. Both, I guess, our roots are in the coalfields, and that probably, in a way, explains the amount of material that we've collected over the years in our cultural collection, and also taken priority to put up a lot of the wonderful resources that we can share with the Hunter community. It was interesting last night, Lynn and I were just going over our notes and talking about today, and I said, look, Lynn, I've heard Jack's voice somewhere before. There's something really familiar, because over the last couple of weeks I've had to do some research. Of course, not in work time, by listening to these tapes. And that voice is very familiar. So I went home last night and there it was. Jack was interviewed around 1975, 76 is my estimate, for one, I would say, one of the best documentaries on the South Maitland Railways and Mines, called The Destiny of Steam, that was produced by InSteam in 1989. And so he was at the other side of the camera being interviewed himself, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to get a copy for the family today who haven't seen it. So we are really grateful for Jack's passion and interest in history and the stories of the communities of the coalfields that we've been listening to this morning. As Lynn said, his community included many different people from very many different backgrounds and interests. But they are interviews which I think help us understand the grassroots of our community. People who were there, who experienced things. They lived through 2 world wars, the Great Depression, and many experienced some hardship. But his passion was also rather ruthless. He spent an awful lot of time doing his research in the Lands Department, the Department of Mines, and he ferreted through the records of many other areas, hundreds of back issues of the Newcastle Herald, the Advertiser, and the Cessnock Eagle, which is now available. It's fully digitised on Trove, so you can actually go and look at many of the old issues. Now, having listened to several interviews, Jack certainly had an unmistakable style as an oral historian. No doubt many of his interviewees were rather nervous to be sitting down with this microphone, sitting on the table. But he would always start with asking them about, where did you live? When were you born? Did you know such and such? Was that up on that street? And before too long, you can just feel the person who was being interviewed suddenly relax and started a conversation. A conversation, however, and this is a little bit of feedback we've collected from the digitisation team, meant that Jack constantly would interject, challenge the facts, like to have a bit of an argument sometimes, and he would sort of challenge them and say, well, let's go get in the car and we'll go down and have a look. And one of the tapes I listened to was mentioned Gifford Eardig. Now, Gifford wrote a book on the South Maitland Railways. It was published in 1969, and it's seen to be a pretty good history of all the mines from the beginning of the industry in the early 20th century right through. And he said, oh, it was full of mistakes. And he said, I had an argument one day with Gifford about 2 branch railway lines, one that ran out to Abermain number 2 at Kearsley, and there was another line that went out to what was Aberdare South, which is in Abernethy, a mine that didn't have a really long working life. And apparently Gifford said, oh, that line they were connected. And Jack said, no, they weren't. So they got in the car, down they went, they walked the line, and Jack was right. They were never connected. The other one that I noted, which was interesting, was an interview with Frank Chatterton. Now Frank was a wagon shunter at the Hetton-Bellberg Colliery, which is obviously close to Bellberg. And it's amazing. They were obviously looking at a photograph of the actual mine site, and Jack went through building by building. Was it about 20 yards by 60 feet? Did it have 2 entrances? How many boilers were in the boiler house? And can you remember how many cubicles were in the washroom? Amazing attention to detail, but also a lament that so much of the records and plans had already been destroyed when these interviews had taken place. Now, the other thing I noticed in the recordings, through their informality, there's an endearing quality. You hear this wonderful background noises. And I thought, is that a bird? There's certainly a clock in the next room chiming. Someone with squeaky shoes keeps walking by. You hear a plane flying overhead, and I think even in the last one we heard a bit of traffic. But there's suddenly an appearance of another voice. And then the interviewer's yelling into another room. Jack, can you remember that house down there? Da, da, da. So they're very natural. And it's really like being in someone's house, listening to the conversations again. And I think that's simply priceless that we have those qualities. Now, Jack Delaney, through real empathy and dogged persistence, has uncovered the heart of our community and shown us its history, and it's now being preserved and digitised, and it's there now for current and future generations. So this time I'd just like to honour Jack by recognising his family in attendance today. So we have Helen Ward and John and son. If you'll just pop your hand up or stand up. Thanks for coming. We also have some of the interviewees who were interviewed by Jack. Jack Keeley, who's here with us. Also Brian J. Andrews and Carl Struck-Pawson, who's with us. In addition, we have family members and descendants of those who were interviewed by Jack with us today. Fons O'Neill, Dee Kelly, George Edwards, Larry Hawkins, Aidan Howard, Harold Slade, Alfred Agnes Williams, Seth Anstey and Harry McKendry. Now, obviously this project wouldn't have been possible without the support of the Coalfields Heritage Group. Many, many thanks for providing access to the tapes. And particularly to Brian and for Lexi who were with us, and Ian Smith, the President, Cheryl Shoesmith, member and volunteer, who have our sincere thanks. We're also eternally grateful for the financial support from Colin Allied, and thank you very much for $70,000. That certainly assisted with making this a real outcome. And we've already acknowledged what we call the BOT team, who have worked through well over 800 tapes, digitising all of those hours so that we have those to enjoy. But I'd also like to recognise the leadership and guidance of Ms. Lynn Keeley, who had the vision for the project, and also with Paige, who co-wrote the grant application and has really made this happen, and also provided all the expertise and assistance and work with the team to make it such a success. And I'd also like to thank the library staff today who have assisted with the organisation of this event. And so without any further ado, I'll officially launch the BOT website, and it's now for everyone's enjoyment. Go and have a listen, enjoy the yarns, and when Jack says, oh look, we better wind this up, you've got your bowl session in about half an hour, you better get going. It's just a reminder of how natural and how precious and priceless these recordings are. So thanks very much.